Welcome to Vacuum Wars. I'm really excited to be testing and reviewing the brand new Ecovacs Deebot Ozmo 960. It's the first robot vacuum to use a kind of artificial intelligence to avoid obstacles. We put it through all of our usual tests, plus a bunch of new tests just for the AI features. And this video will show the results and be our review. So links in the description, and let's get started. Before I get into all the fancy new AI features, I do want to talk about its performance as a robot vacuum first, because there is a lot to like with just that. But if you want to skip right to the AI stuff, you can go to the timestamp on the screen or in the description. Starting off with the pros, while I found that its airflow is about average at 15 CFM on high power, the same as our test with the Roborock S6 for example, its suction power measured at the intake with the manometer was much higher than the average robot vacuum. And I saw that suction power show up in several tests. For example, it was easily one of the top 2 performances I've ever seen on the crevice pickup test, where it cleared the entire field in both crevices, and it's the only standard Brushroll designed robot vacuum I've seen do that. It also did amazingly well, like top 5% of any robot vacuum I've tested at the carpet deep clean test, where we embed 100 grams of sand and run the robot for 5 minutes on medium pile carpet. I think part of the reason it did so well on those 2 tests is because of the automatically adjusting Brushroll housing, which adapts to the floor height, which is great for utilizing that high suction power and for getting the brush very close to the carpet for agitation. While we're on this point, another pro is that you can actually change out the Brushroll with a suction only plate. This is something that you would only want to do if you had all or mostly all hard floors in your home, as it's not very good for carpets, but the benefits of doing it are that number 1, there's no hair tangles, since there's no brush to get tangled. The hair just gets sucked up into the dustbin. It's also better with larger debris. In the past, I haven't really liked these suction only plates, but this is the first time I've tested one where I can say that the cleaning job was good enough that I would actually recommend people using it if they had all hard floors in their home. It should be noted that with its regular Brushroll, it did really good with our hair tangle tests anyway. With 1 gram of 5-inch hair, we found no tangles, which only a handful of robot vacuums can claim to be able to do, though when I upped it to 1 gram of 7-inch hair, I started to see about 40% getting caught in the roller, which is actually pretty good for 7-inch hair, believe it or not. Before I leave its pickup ability, I wanted to say that it was fairly impressive on both hard floors and carpets. I was particularly impressed with its ability to pick up heavy debris like sand on hard floors in both its regular and suction only mode, which is very much above average, and on carpets it was excellent as well on both its low and high power settings with all debris types and sizes. Another pro was that it was incredibly quiet at 60 decibels on high power, easily 10 decibels quieter than most robot vacuums, and probably the quietest robot I personally have ever tested. With navigation, it's a smart robot vacuum, so it makes a map of your house and cleans in straight, efficient lines. It does this using LiDAR, which means it has a top-mounted spinning laser to map out your house. Like most LiDAR-based bots, it develops a map after just 1 run, and you can then play around with all the cool app features like virtual barriers. Subscribers of this channel know how much I love the virtual app barriers, sometimes called no-go lines, as I think they make robot vacuums so much more effective because you can make sure they don't go places that they are likely to get stuck, and so the user experience is better all around. With our tests, I found that the no-go lines were as accurate as I'm used to with LiDAR robots, and I found that it was good at its navigation in terms of coverage, and it efficiently covered our test area in a very fast 18 minutes. But there were some minor issues here that I will address in the cons section later on. Okay, so let's move on to the super cool new feature, the so-called AI-VI, which stands for Artificial Intelligence and Visual Interpretation. Basically, in addition to the top-mounted laser used for navigation, the 960 has a front-mounted camera, which it uses for seeing obstacles and interpreting them in order to make navigation decisions. So it's the first robot vacuum that can see an obstacle that it's likely to get stuck on, like a sock or a cord or something, and instead of running it over, the 960 avoids it by recognizing that it's not a part of the normal environment. I ran a number of tests with this, and you can see that while it does occasionally touch the obstacle, it does completely move around it. And because of its accurate laser-based mapping ability, it still finds a path to cover the entire area. I was impressed that it seemed to really understand the dimensions of the obstacle, so it could avoid it even when its camera was not perfectly aligned with it. You can also hit this button on the app after the cleaning to see which areas it marked as having AI-assisted obstacle avoidance instances. To understand how cool this really is, you need to see the difference between how the 960 does on this test and how other robot vacuums do. So take a look at the previous Deebot model, the Deebot Ozmo 950, which only has the laser but no camera, and it just pushes the cones around. The issue is that all robot vacuums have a bump sensor and maneuver around things that trigger that bump sensor, but what about those things like socks or cords, or yes, the dreaded pet accidents that are too light to trigger the bump sensor and too low for the laser to interact with it? Also look at how the budget Deebot, the N79S, does, which doesn't have a camera or lasers, and it does what you would expect it to do, and what a mess that would make if those weren't novelty items. That's what makes this a truly awesome innovation, and it means that it will radically reduce, in fact eliminate, the need for prep work before running your robot vacuum, like getting cords or other obstacles out of the way first. So between this AI, VI, and the no-go lines, it's basically ready for any kind of house, and you no longer have to clean the house before you clean the house. Before I move on to the cons, there are a few things that were neither good nor bad, but just kind of neutral. For example, the Dustbin was just a little bit on the small side at 450 milliliters, about the same size as the Roborock S5 and S6. I really wanted to love the mopping attachment. I mean, it has all the right qualities, like an attachment with washable pads, a fairly large water tank, it has a lot of app features like where you can control the amount of water flow in the app. My main problem was that I couldn't seem to get the water to dispense much, despite me upping the levels on the app to its maximum setting. I'm not sure if I was doing something wrong, but it just didn't seem to be working right, so the various mopping test results were pretty bad. The battery life, like the power levels, were also down from the earlier version. Ecovacs says that the 960 can get only 100 minutes compared to the 200 minutes on the 950. I assumed that the additional camera and maybe some of the software features for the AI meant that there had to be some sacrifices with power and battery life from the 950, but as with most smart robot vacuums, battery life isn't that big of a deal anymore since they have recharge and resume, where if the battery does run low, the robot will automatically return to the base to recharge and then resume cleaning where it left off. As far as the cons, most of it was pretty minor. Like, I love the dual edge brush design, but I felt they were a little too fast and tended to scatter larger amounts of debris a little more than I liked. I also felt like the size and height was a little bigger than usual. I'm sure it will be too high to get under some couches out there. Despite its size, I found that it was really good at getting into most nooks and crannies, but I did find that about half the time it failed to clean under the chair legs in our test room. That's a pretty rare thing, and it didn't happen every time, but it did happen enough times to mention it. All in all though, I was super impressed with the Deebot Ozmo 960. I really do think it is the future of robot vacuums. I have a video coming up where I'm going to explain exactly why I think that, and yes, it's pretty expensive, but it's also fairly easy to explain why it's so expensive with all this new hardware and software. And in our tests, it showed that it was also really good at its main job, which was vacuuming hard floors and carpets. So check the links in the description and be sure to subscribe to Vacuum Wars for more. Thanks for watching.